So I'm Sadie Groom. I'm the CEO of Bubble Agency, and we look after many B2B companies in the sports technology and broadcast world. I'm co-chair of the PRCA Sports Group with James Stibbs, who many of you probably know. I'm delighted to be chatting to Brendon tonight. So I have got lots of questions for him. Please put any questions in the Q&A that you would like me to ask him as well. And so I'm going to give you a bit of background to Brendon and why he's here. I think most of you know who he is already. So English football, former footballer. He played as a defender for Arsenal, Cambridge and West Brom. Why is he here today? Well, Brendon was the first Black player in the Gunners' first team. As part of the 3 degrees, as they were known, not the band, but the trio of Cyrille, Regis and Laurie Cunningham at West Brom under Big Ron, as I always called him. There's a statue of the 3 of you, I believe, at the Hawthorns, Brendon, which I've seen online, but not in person. I shared this with Brendon earlier. I'm a big Oxford United fan. So not really up with any of those teams to play for, but I know that you had an affiliation with Oxford, and I know Big One always did as well. But after playing, Brendon was appointed Deputy Chief Exec of the PFA, which in 1984, and later rejoined West Brom as Managing Director. And I got all this off Wikipedia, so it could all be wrong. And do you have an MBE or an OBE or both?
I got the MBE first, and then I followed on by the OBE. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So how do you do? Which ones do you use?
No, you do. I just after much persuasion, I use the OBE. Yeah. I was told I have to use it. So
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know
you don't use both. No.
Right. Okay. See, look, the question: every day's a school day. So, is there anything else, Brendon, to that introduction that you would like to add?
No, just to say that the statue actually is not at West Brom. It's in West Brom town, not the Hawthorns.
Right.
Over that, but it's actually in the town. Yeah,
it's actually in the town. Well,
slight adjustment, yeah.
Well, there we go. Told you about Wikipedia. Right. So these questions aren't from Wikipedia. So I'm going to crack on. So obviously you've been involved with the PFA for many years now. How high up the agenda is tackling racism for the organisation? Going straight in there with a big question.
Well, yeah, it still remains high up on the agenda, and it always has been, particularly since 1993 when we started off the Kick It Out campaign, national campaign, brainchild of Herman Ousley, now Lord Ousley, Sir Herman Ousley, and really it's never gone away. From being very much top of the agenda, and even more so now. You know, what we did get rid of was that overt racism within stadiums, within grounds, all that monkey chanting that Black players had to put up with from the 70s throughout. Now it's a bit more subtle, but it's still very relevant, and that's why Kick It Out and all the other campaigns like Show Racism Red Card and Football Unites Racism Divides, all those sort of locally led, fan-led campaigns are still very, very relevant. And you see now players are embracing it even more and more in a very high-profile way.
Yeah, I mean, how does it work in the PFA? Are there particular departments, are there particular people that look over it, or does it stretch across the whole of the organisation?
Well, from the PFA's point of view, they have an equalities department, which is headed up by Simone Pound, who's been there a number of years, and her and her staff do a fantastic job in that particular area. But in terms of Kick It Out, which is the stakeholders coming together, Premier League, Football League, FA, that really is the national campaign. That's an independent body, but it's funded by the stakeholders. And as I say, that's one of many, and the other high profile one being Show Racism Red Card. So it is very much within the fabric of the game in all areas. Premier League have got its own. I'm sure people who follow it and they see the live matches, you'll see little pop-ups, no room for racism. Of course, now you're seeing the players take the knee. So it is very much in the public consciousness, and the players want to keep that message alive.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about how the PFA is campaigning and communicating that, and from everywhere, because from commentary really to coaching, and how does that work up and down the leagues as well, I guess?
Well, as I say, the PFA are part of Kick It Out, while still having their own department. But what you're trying to do is making sure that message gets out there, that they won't tolerate any form of racism. You see it particularly with the online abuse that you're getting, particularly directed at players. We know what happened with the England game in the Euros. And really, it's an opportunity, sadly as it is, to really get that message out that it shouldn't be tolerated. It cannot be tolerated. But you're looking at the tech companies who have these platforms to do a lot more. You're looking for government to intervene at times, but you are very much reliant on fans. The fans are the ones that can try and regulate within the stadiums. The players have a platform, they've got a voice. It doesn't matter what level you're playing at. Obviously, the top level, the high profile players that we know about, but throughout the divisions, players on a local basis are getting that message across that, we don't want it in the game. It's a very, very cosmopolitan game now. You look at the different nationalities that are playing within our leagues. Stadiums are much more welcoming places to go to now than they were previously. But you still get little pockets of it, and it's got to be stamped out almost immediately. You can report it. They've got the apps for Kick It Out. So there's a lot of tools there to try and friend it, but sadly, it still goes on. It's really disappointing, but it still goes on.
What's it like in different countries? I mean, do you know about that? Is it better, worse? Are we high up?
Well, we've seen what's happening.
Table.
Yeah. We've seen what's happened in international football. We've seen what's happening in England games. The governing bodies send the messages out. You've got the international organisation, FAIR, who have a watching brief at the particular international games. But as I say, it is about the fans and the implementation of the protocols within the games. If there is a breakout of racist chanting, we've seen it happen a couple of times. But really, I think sometimes the governing bodies don't do enough when clubs or countries breach those protocols. Particularly, I think FIFA can do a lot more, UEFA can do a lot more, because maybe the deterrence needs to be looked at, because at the moment, they don't seem to be having the impact that they should.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've read that, we all know there's a lot more racism in the game when you started playing. But today, half of all fans in England still, so half all this is according to a YouGov poll, half of all fans in England think that racism is still a serious problem in football. Why do you think the progress has been so slow?
So I missed that, sorry.
Why do you think the progress has been so slow in, if half of the English football fans still think it's a problem?
Well, part of it is that it's human nature, sadly. We talk about this all the time. We've seen what happened in the States, the protests there, the Black Lives Matter movement. One of the things I feel is that over the years, as Black players have come to the fore, we've never seen that being sort of replicated within stadiums in terms of fans. Still, I think Arsenal probably got the most ethnic minority fans, but we're thinking about diverse. But we're not seeing that integration within fan bases. And part of that, I believe, is that as Black players came to the fore, in the 70s, 80s, hooliganism was rife. Racism was a breeding ground for the National Front. And you just didn't see Black supporters, or they wanted to support Black players. You just didn't see them in numbers, and that hasn't helped. And whilst you try and put things in place, the online issues are causing much more problems than I think anybody envisaged.
Yeah,
And
so that's probably slowed it massively, because
oh
then,
yeah,
I mean, there are definitely some people out there who should not be allowed access to the internet.
well, as I say, the genie's out the bottle, and I'm not quite sure how you're gonna stop it. But you've got the online harms bill that's being discussed, and there's a lot of stuff going on. But it does seem low. It does seem as though there isn't a real appetite to tackle it at the highest level.
No.
The players are doing their bit. I think fans, those fans that are like-minded in terms of getting things, looking to oppose those sort of views, they're doing their bit. But it is people higher up who seem to be dragging their feet.
Yeah, and I guess if they're not from a diverse background, then it's all about seeing it and being it as well, I guess, as in having
I
those.
think sometimes people think that if you have a policy that says we're an equal opportunities employer, we don't tolerate racism, that they think that's enough. Putting words on paper has never been enough.
No.
We see what happens when you've got more of a direct action, when people are. It might be a certain amount of symbolism, but it does raise awareness. It does sort of poke people to say, you've got to be doing more. But then, the wagon rolls on and something else comes. But racism within sport, not just in football, within sport, we don't see what's happening in cricket. It's always been alive and a hot topic, and sometimes I think people at the top just don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, there's the football, and I guess now cricket, as you're saying, has been so high profile. And some other sports are getting criticised for their lack of activity around this. I mean, I'm a golfer, and I'm, you get embarrassed about looking, if I go up to my club and just see the lack of, I mean, there's lack of diversity in female golfers, obviously, but, colours, age, all of those things. And it's just, there's no balance or blend of people. It's,
there's all sorts of, there's all sorts of discrimination. We live in an unequal society. I think sometimes the gap between those who have and those who haven't seems to be growing wider on a year-by-year basis. And you look at some policies that come into place, you look at what government's doing, and you're thinking, well, this term, this leveling up, if you want to talk about policy a little bit, but it doesn't seem to really embrace all those who really need a helping hand. And when you talk about racism, I talk about what I know in football, we see that integration within the playing field. We see it. It's always been there in parks, pitches, particularly, second generation immigrants coming in, and people like I did. I'm part of the Windrush generation, and I never seen football until I came to England, and football found me through my friends and what have you. But what we don't see is that transition from playing field or from within clubs, within the employment of people from the ethnic minorities, in positions where they can attract others who think, football clubs are a potential employer, and that's where I want to go. You just don't see it because there hasn't been a reach out enough to say, come and join us. We just don't want you as footballers. You can come and join us in the, in our admin staff, in our ticket offices, all that sort of stuff. You just don't see it.
No, that is such a great point. And I think that, football is such a massive industry, and, and it's almost like that. Well, I'm not going to make it as a footballer, so there's no other job for me. And, like you say, there are, so I think football itself has to, that's a job in itself that they need to be doing to be able to get.
I think you can't sit back and wait and think that people are just going to be turning up in your door. You've got to reach out. You've got to, it's a bit like saying you need to see diversity in action. You can't keep talking about it. You've got to be out there and live it. I mean, going back to players of my era, we thought it was enough at that time to say, we're here, we're going to take all the abuse, we're going to have all the chanting us thrown, we have bananas being thrown at us, we'll come again, we'll see you next week, next month, next year. We thought that was enough. Generation after generation has come forward, and as though we've just hit a bit of a a wall. And clubs have just been happy to embrace the players, but doesn't seem to be doing enough to embrace the rest of, depending on where your club's situated, obviously, the rest of that diverse community, and say, come and join us. We want you to be part of the club, not just to see diversity on the pitch.
Yeah, 100%. And what a great industry to work in.
Oh, it's a fantastic industry.
You know, I'd love to go and work at Oxford United. Maybe someone.
That's what I did. We used to do our pre-season training. Shot over hills, I think it was called.
Shot over, yeah. Nice houses up there.
Well, they weren't there when we were running up those hills. Yeah.
No, exactly. Talking of running up hills, I had a question around the players, and you know what you think the role of players is in communicating the need for change.
Well, going back to my previous point, players of my era, the 70s, 80s, we thought it was enough just to be there, just by being a physical presence. That was enough to encourage, and certainly in my naivety, I thought that would almost help to get rid of those sort of overt racism within stadiums. Now players have got much more of a voice, much more of a profile. I mean, Premier League is rock and roll now, isn't it? I mean, it's showbiz. It
really is, yeah.
And the good thing is, and whilst we can criticise, and quite rightly we criticise, you know, these platforms and you know, Twitter and everything else that goes with it, the players can use that in a very positive way, and they do. But once they put themselves out there, then of course that attracts another line of abuse, and they're being targeted. And I think a lot of players, you know, they're almost caught betwixt and between. Yeah. They want to engage with the fans, they want to have that dialogue with them, and they want to tell their story, not just what somebody else is going to write about them. They can correct some of the misinterpretations that maybe the media might want to tag them with. So it is a bit of a double-edged sword, but the players certainly can use their profile. Everybody will talk about Marcus Rashford, but we saw what happened during at the start of the lockdowns. You know, people like Jordan Henderson pulling the captains together, leading the charge to say we want to support the NHS. So, and this is not just the high-profile players. I think on a local basis, on a local level, players are doing unbelievable work to support their communities, which sometimes doesn't attract national attention, but it goes on. So players have got a very powerful voice now. They
do, and I think it's interesting. I've read quite a lot recently. There's been quite a bit in the Times in the Saturday supplement around footballers and their social media accounts, and how having other people run them for them, and you know how it, you know, mistakes have happened, but you know how, you know, and it's interesting, I guess, for them to be able to, you know, to, as you say, to balance that between, you know, people wanting them to speak, but then being opened up for abuse if they do.
I think, and let's not forget, they're still young men. You know, they're making their way. You know, it's hard enough growing up in the spotlight, but you know, you're trying to maintain your form, your fitness, stay in the team. But they've got much more of a social conscious now. And you know, using Marcus Rashford as an example, they're not just doing it because it's they feel it'll enhance their image. I mean, Marcus Rashford, it's a lived experience. That's why I think people have really gravitated to him, because, you know, when he talks, you know, it comes from the heart because it's a lived experience. So in terms of what, you know, the local communities almost rely on their clubs, not just for going and seeing them on a Saturday or Tuesday night, but all the other things that go with it when a football game is on, the sort of success or lack of has within that local community. So, and the players are an important part, and players come and go. You know, that's the nature of sport. When our legs go, we move on, and somebody else comes along. But those fans, they're there to support their club. Yeah. You know, the highest level, you've got owners, and yet they come and go, but it's the fans who keep on supporting their clubs through thick and thin.
I mean, we haven't really even talked about managers, have we? I mean, there's, how many black managers are there?
I think there's 5 at the moment.
I was going to say, I mean, there's, you know, and that's...
We lost Nuno, didn't we? We lost Nuno.
We did, yeah.
I've lost track of it a little bit. it became almost not an obsession, but I was looking at all the time and seeing. I remember going back many years. I think we reached a high point of 7, and that included people like Ruud Gullit and Jean Tigana, who was at Fulham. And because they had that sort of foreign tag at the time, it almost made them a bit more exotic, and made them, they've got to be better than what we've got, from on a domestic basis. So,
yeah.
But then we've just never been able to break through that. And I think part of it is that perception. I mean, even within the media, they promote the next managers. You see people like, going back recently, you had, Steven Gerrard, you had Frank Lampard, you had John Terry, and I go back and back, Graham Souness, my era, Graham Souness, Brian Robson, all those. They never promoted black players.
No.
You never saw. I always use Rio Ferdinand as a bit of an example. Now, I spoke to Rio in the past. He never gave the impression that he wanted to be a manager, and he's obviously forging his way within the media as a pundit and whatever.
Yeah.
Well, he was captain of Man United. He was captain of England. I never once saw his name being mentioned, as far as I'm aware, of being a potential manager.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's a perception of, well, either one, they're not interested, or two, they've not got the right stuff to be manager. Great players, but we had John Barnes, had an opportunity, didn't get any further.
No, well, he gave up his rap career, though, didn't he? I mean, that was a shame. He gave up his musical career, rapping, so that was a shame.
maybe it's better than that. But it's one of those. You're looking for this generation. I mean, there's some very, very good coaches, from ethnic minority backgrounds who are making their way lower. At the FA, we promoting stuff with the FA, the PFA. There's like old Justin Cochran, who's recently left the FA, has gone to Man United. There are one or two very, very good coaches who are making their way. So maybe in years to come, we'll see them in a dugout.
Yeah, and and it is, they are profile people, aren't they? Even more than the owners. I mean, that those TV shots of the dugout and the press conference, that in terms of, if you can see it, you can be it type thing. Then
correct. Yeah, the shop window. That's a shop window.
It is. The dugout is your shop window.
Yeah.
Talking, I just want to talk about the role of media in all of this. And you mentioned it briefly. Do you think the media has a long way to go before it can be a part of the conversation? Could they do more?
I mean, sadly, we lost Gerald since that a short while ago.
Yeah.
And as far as black players are concerned, he was memorable moment when he was the first, as I'm aware, if I am correct, in mentioning it was a game against Manchester United, West Brom against Manchester United. Laurie, Cunningham, Cyrille, and myself were on the team, and you could hear on a regular basis all the racist abuse coming through the TV screens. Nobody mentioned it until Gerald, since that, mentioned it.
Yeah,
I think his words were, I'm paraphrasing now. The baiting of the black players is graceful, something like that. But it was a bit of a shock to us, where we thought, flipping heck, somebody's actually mentioning it. But we had a mindset, I think, at that time, whereby it wasn't going to affect us. Cyrille, Regis, bless him, my old teammate, said the best way of dealing with it, as far as he was concerned, was to bang another one in the back of the net, get the points, get on the coach, and go home. And that was a sort of mentality that we had. But yes, I do think the media was slow. It's getting better. We're seeing more colour within the media.
definitely.
In terms of the papers and newscasters and what have you. But a lot of it you're seeing in terms of the pundits. We've got a lot of former players and within the BBC and stuff like that. So progress is made, but at times it feels painfully slow. And the next generation, or this generation, are saying, why is it taking so long? But that's the way it seems to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that, George Floyd's death, 4,000 miles away, it changed things. It did put everyone into action, didn't it? Why do you think that was? Or do you
say it changed things?
Did it, or didn't it?
It raised the profile. I mean,
raised the profile.
Yeah, we over here, we tend to follow what we see in the States, and I think that seeing it live on seeing it on television when we saw those recordings, it was just so shocking. You couldn't quite believe what you were seeing. You know, this wasn't a film scene. You know, this was real. And I think it touched so many people. I mean, in Birmingham at a time, and I went to some of the protests. I got quite emotional because I saw these young kids, all different colours and nationalities. It was fantastic, all with the same message. Now, when the players obviously took the knee with Cunningham, and you see all that symbolism, and then you're saying, what else? What is going to change? And so far, nothing has really changed. And it's been like that year in, year out, year in, year out. I think what it did do was to raise awareness of the injustices that we're experiencing in this country. It isn't just America, but it's other countries, in all forms of discrimination across the world.
Yeah.
We see what's going on in Afghanistan at the moment, and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, we've seen stuff about female athletes being, you know, warned off and threatened and with all sorts. So there's lots of inequalities, but, you know, you've got to try and clean up your own backyard, so to speak, before you start criticizing others. And we've got a long way to go here. Listen, it's not all doom and gloom.
No, well, one of my questions was going to be, come on, let's.
Things have changed.
Things that,
fantastically. I mean, you know, it's far better than when I first started. Make no mistake about that. But each generation, when I say to my kids, my grandkids, they can't understand how I sort of put up with certain things that I did, and all of us of that era did. Our parents coming across during the Caribbean and all that sort of stuff. Those are the things you have to work through to make small advancements. They want it a lot quicker. The current generation are impatient, and they want things a lot quicker.
They do, yes. Is that, give it to me now?
In all things. In
all things. We have no patience anymore. It's great. One other big part of the football industry is the brands and sponsorship. You know, what do you think those companies can do more to help the situation?
Well, a great example, obviously, is what's happened at Yorkshire Cricket.
Yeah, well,
everything seemed to be, I'm not saying it's been accepted, but I think it was the sponsors who came out straight away, almost immediately, and that seemed to spark or fan the flames of what's going on at the moment in terms of change. Of course, they do, not just in football, but they have a role in making sure that they're very sensitive to their brands. So they want to attach themselves to clubs that are almost seen to be doing the right thing. But that sounds great, but it's a money-making business. You know, the big brands are attached themselves with the big clubs because of their fan base. You want to sell their products. You know, I was in Hong Kong a few years ago, West Brom, and the Asia Cup, and it was Crystal Palace, Leicester, Liverpool, and West Brom. When Liverpool were playing, that was like double headers, 2 matches on the same night. The stadium, I would say, was 95% Liverpool. Really? All got replica shirts on. It was a sea of red. You know, so we know why sponsors and big brands want to attach to the football, because it's a worldwide business, and the Premier League is the biggest league in the world in terms of football. So yes, they do have a role to play, but at the end of it all, I keep going back to the fans. The fans are the heart of the game. You know, the game's about players and supporters in that order. You know, we played as kids and became our profession. Those who attach themselves to clubs, it's been their life, and their whole week is shaped by the result on a weekend. You know,
I know that.
Either going into your work next day really buoyant, or you're going in like doom and gloom. So yes, they do have a part to play, but you know, sometimes they ignore certain things because success is the be all and end all at times.
Yeah, and I guess it's how you get to all those levels of fans, and it's not just, you know, one of my friends is head of comms at Man U, who's obviously had a very busy week, but you know, when he joined, he said that, you know, there's so many tiers of media. You know, you've got like from the Henry Winter at the Times, but you know, but right down to the one guy who has a fanzine that you know, who's got so much power and such a big voice as well. And I guess it's how you get to all of those, you know, people as well, to get this message out there that it's not right.
It's amazing what success does. When it's successful, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
When you're going through a sticky time, then it becomes a real problem for the comms team.
Yeah.
It's always been the case, but now it is such a 24 hours non-stop rolling news, not just in sport, but in everything else. You've got to try and manage it. And, you know, the attrition rate for managers is so high now. You know, it's in their blood. It's in their blood, and you're thinking, why do you do it? But you know, the highs and lows that you have in it is what keeps them going, really.
Yeah. Well, and they're nice contracts that they get as well.
Well, you've got to be paid the going rate. That's the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the important thing. Right. So, other questions from anybody? Oh, we have got one. Right. So I'm looking at my other screen. I'm not like looking up into the air. Brendon mentioned football clubs serving their diverse communities. Do you think clubs can do more to serve disabled supporters? I think only a few meet the ratio of disabled seating to standard seating.
Yes, without doubt, they should be doing more. Again, I think it's around the how you look to enforce it. Clubs at times try and get the maximum they can from their stadium capacity. And I mentioned about discrimination across the board, and that includes disabled, diverse communities, you know, whether it be women, all that sort of stuff. They've got to do more. They know they've got to do more, but particularly at the top end, when it's they've got waiting lists for season tickets and all that sort of stuff, they almost get sidetracked because they want to look after their commercial partners, they want to look after the media, and sometimes you just think it doesn't matter, the fans will still come, irrespective. So yes, they do. I think Joyce Cook was a great advocate for disabled. I think she's with FIFA or UEFA now. I've lost track slightly. A fantastic woman. And a real voice for that section of the community. But yes, I think clubs, look, there are many areas where clubs can do a lot more.
Yeah.
They will look at their finances and they'll say, oh, well, you know, we've got to make sure we get it right on the pitch. All our money's going on players' wages. And they'll use all sorts of excuses. But, you know, they have a responsibility for those who come through turnstiles.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what's interesting as well is the, you know, with the Women's Super League as well, and I think, you know, Sky's put in a lot more money for that, and you know, so the BBC, and you know, we're seeing so much more of that on the screens as well. So
yeah, it's fantastic. I think the women's game is on the up and up, and you know, it's great to see the interest, and particularly from young girls, because that's the growth area, and that's how you're going to grow participation, and obviously it's going to get better and better. And of course, we've got, as we've seen with the American women's team, they're the most successul, and they're still fighting for certain equal rights.
I know.
So yes, you've got a long way to go, and you go back to what you talked about, sponsors and commercial companies. They, I think, will begin to start supporting the women's game a lot more because they can see that is a massive growth area.
Yeah, and I think, you know, wow, imagine if like the women's team got paid the same as well. That would be amazing.
Well, that'd be the next one. Yeah,
you know,
you look at other sports in terms of
tennis. Yeah.
I mean, that was a big outcry of that. Now it's no big deal because you think it's the right thing. That was the right thing to do.
That was the right thing to do. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a question from Daisy. Says that given that the fan-led review on football governance has just been released, which I had, and I heard all about it on 5 this morning or yesterday, do you think there should have been more within this document to hold clubs accountable for discrimination within the stands, creating a deterrence? Great question.
I must admit, I've only just begun to read about it.
But it'd be... It's quite a long report, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes. I think the devil will be using that hackneyed phrase, the devil will be in the detail.
Yeah.
To see where, who are they going to regulate? To me, I think it seems to be centered around the governing body, the FA, I've seen some comments from some of the chief execs of the Premier League saying they do a lot already in terms of supporting solidarity payments for the pyramid structure. So it'd be interesting to see how it develops. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about it. I mean, the setup here in America, they have regulators, commissioners for a lot of the sports, and they are very, very powerful individuals. But that's a different structure completely over there.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure you can actually replicate that. But it'd be interesting to see, because obviously it's fan-led, and so I think you've got to listen to what the fans are asking for and see how best you can accommodate them.
Yeah. James, did you have any questions for Brendon?
Yes, thank you, Brendon. It's been a fascinating conversation so far. I was interested in what you were saying about the responsibilities of tech. I think it's pretty clear to everybody that social media has emboldened a lot of people to be, to show their true colours, to be horrible racists, to feel free, to find a community of people who support that kind of thing. And I'm reflecting on something that, Lush, the cosmetics brand.
Yes.
And this week they announced that they were withdrawing from a number of social media channels because, they weren't confident that social media giants were taking care of people properly, that they weren't taking their duty of care towards users properly. They were contributing to mental health problems. And so Lush have taken the decision to pull back from a number of social media channels. Not all of them. I think they're going to stick around on maybe Twitter and YouTube. Yeah. But I just wonder whether you think, is that one of the answers here? Is that clubs, leagues, players create so much of the conversation on social media for users, particularly, users like me, a sports fan? Is the solution, one of the solutions here for them all, or for them to begin to think about their responsibilities of being part of these platforms which enable and embolden racism?
I think that's really difficult because in one way, you look to withdraw, you're actually punishing those individuals who want to be part of that conversation. They want to be speaking directly to clubs, speaking directly to players. I really think the responsibility lies solely with those tech giants, those who, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, all those platforms. Legislation, if you go back and you think, right, newspapers, there's legislation to regulate that part of the media. What I don't quite understand, my understanding of it is, the more controversy you have on social media, the better the advertisers love it, because they're getting more and more numbers through that conversation, good, bad, or indifferent. So there seems to me a lack of appetite because of revenues that are driving these companies. There seems to be a lack of appetite to actually regulate. Government don't seem to have the wherewithal to regulate. So at the moment, it's like the Wild West. And, the ones who are sadly being affected by it take sometimes drastic actions. We've heard about suicides and people having, you mentioned about mental health problems, and which is very, very sad. And you're thinking, well, governments are there to protect their citizens. Why aren't they doing something about this? And you've got the online harms bill, which I think is making its way through. Whether that comes to any sort of conclusion or fruition, I don't know. But I do think, I don't understand why we can't get a grip of this. There's some very clever people out there. Surely, if you put their brains together or their heads together, they can come to some sort of solution. But at the moment, I repeat, there seems to be a lack of appetite to get a grip of it.
It's a shame.
And you talk to players all the time, I know, Brendon.
Not as I used to, James.
Not as often. Well, more for them. But I know you're involved in player groups, and I think, are you still a trustee of the PFA?
I am. Yes.
Yeah. What's the view of players about all of this? Do they just kind of shrug their shoulders and wonder why is no one doing anything? Is there anger? How do they feel about it in generality? And
Well, I'm
and
limited in
talking
that
about
because
lack of progress.
Yeah, I'm limited. I don't speak to them directly as much as I used to. So my understanding, my feeling is there is a lot of frustration. Some of them actually close their accounts. Sadie's mentioned other people maybe are fronting their accounts and getting them in a bit of trouble. So I think certainly at the top level, a lot of players are looking to take more control of their accounts and making a decision, I'm going to come off it. But a lot of them I know are reluctant to do that because they're then not having that conversation with the people that they want to influence directly, and there's almost that conflict of saying, I've had enough of this rubbish I'm taking. But on the other side, there's a lot of good that comes from it. There's a lot of people we saw what happened with the lads in the Euros, all the rubbish they had to put up with. I mean, I was watching, I'm thinking, oh my God, please don't miss that. Don't please,
miss.
Yeah.
Please score.
For lots of
score.
Reasons.
Marcus Rashford, they're up against a great goalkeeper. Marcus Rashford's the only one who missed. He hit the post. The goalkeeper saved him. Nobody seems to give credit to the goalkeeper. He's huge as well. But the other side of that was they got so much love from, not just from the local community, but from the wider public. And you're thinking, well, that is what the game should be about. You've been out there. How many of us would have loved to be in Marcus Rashford's shoes or Sacco to take a penalty in a major final? Forget the outcome of the kick. We would have just loved to be in their position because that's what you're going to professional football for. So all my sympathies are with them, but they've been fantastic. But the people who seem to peddle this stuff, they've always been there. They were there in my time. They were there in, before my time, and they'll still be there, sadly. But there's a lot more love out there than there's hate, and that's what you got to keep a grip of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one ray of light there was the way that Sacco was treated when he made his first appearance following the tournament.
Yeah.
Cheered onto the pitch. I think it was by Spurs fans, wasn't it? Which makes it even more remarkable.
Yes.
But that cheer that gave me a little bit of optimism that right-minded people were doing the right thing for the most part. But I go to Wolves games, season ticket holder at Wolves, and you still get. There's plenty of unenlightened people there. I'd hesitate to call them anything more than that. Who kind of, when when the players take the knee, that it's pretty divisive still among fans.
Which I don't understand. I mean, you go there to support your team. If the players think this is an issue they want to support, and they want to keep that all these injustices in the world, they want to keep that at the forefront of people's thinking. Why not just say, right, that's their view. We're going to be respectful.
Yeah.
We don't have to necessarily agree with them, but we're going to be respectful. And in 30 seconds, 10 seconds, 50, whatever it is, that's all you've got to be quiet for. And then you get on with the game. I find it so disrespectful. I don't understand the mentality of people like that. And again, you wonder what messaging goes out from the clubs on a regular basis saying, look, these are the players you come to support within our stadium. We let you in, you've got your season ticket, we take your money, but can you just be respectful for flipping 10 to 30 seconds?
Yeah,
exactly. That's not a lot to ask for.
That's not a lot. It's not a lot to ask at all, is it? Okay. James, any other questions? I've got two quick ones.
No, go ahead.
Oh, so these are final questions for Brendon. Who's going to be the next Man United manager?
Oh dear. Anybody's guess. I haven't seen. I'm not a betting man. I don't know bookmakers. All the chatter of us is Pochettino. I mean, he is a very, very good manager. You really don't know. I mean,
you don't know.
Talk about when did Alex Ferguson retire now, and it's still a poison chalice. You know? But it's a challenge. I mean, managers, they've got big egos. All of them have got big egos. They all think they'll be able to do it. So there won't be lack of interest. Put it that way.
Yeah. Exactly. And have you ever been asked to be on Strictly?
I think that ship sailed. Yeah. If I had your knees, Sadie, I'd be able to give it a go. But I think the knees would find me out.
The knees give you away.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I have to look after them very carefully.
Absolutely, as you should. So, thank you so much, Brendon. I think we've all found that fascinating, and your input on it. And to the, the industry, the football industry, because it is a football industry at large, has, really benefited from all the work that you've done. So thank you for that. Thank you for taking your time out to speak with us today. And that's it from us, folks.
Pleasure to join you. Nice to be able to get a few viewpoints across.
Good.
Good to see you, James, as well. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.